And the game of the year is... Astro Bot!
This is how the 2024 Game Awards ended. Astro Bot won despite some stiff competition. Balatro, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, Metaphor Fantasio, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the fan favorite, Black Myth Wukong. After the ceremony, Feng Ji, the CEO of Black Myth Wukong's developer Game Science, took to social media to... reflect? Vent? Yet, I must admit there's a sense of loss and regret. More than anything though, there's a letting go of illusions. The games nominated this year were all exceptional, but honestly, I still can't figure out what the criteria were for Game of the Year. I feel like I came here for nothing. This was the translation that circulated around the English-speaking gaming press, but I want to focus on the question at the center. What are the criteria for Game of the Year? Well, the easy cop-out answer is that award shows don't matter. And they don't. Not really. Award shows, no matter what they're for, sit at a strange intersection. Winning an award is not synonymous with critical acclaim, commercial success, or cultural impact. But in order to be considered, a work will need these things at least a little bit. Winning an award like this signifies institutional acceptance. What do the people who design, develop, market, and write about games believe is the best example their industry has to offer? Also, it's just fun to complain about award shows. Speaking personally, I love award season because it's fun to get invested in something with relatively low stakes. The Game Awards has become something to look forward to each December. It's big and lavish and cheesy and easy to poke fun at. But, of course, they're far from the only video game awards out there. That got me thinking, what kinds of games do these award shows reward? Well, I did what any self-respecting nerd would do and gathered a bunch of data. I took a look at 5 of the most prestigious video game awards ceremonies, what they nominate, what they award, and what they snub, all in hopes of finding out how to win Game of the Year. Before we get too far, a couple of ground rules. I will be staying as objective as I can. I will do my best to refrain from adding my own opinions about the games discussed. When describing the games, I will stick to literal descriptions of their content. The point of this video is not to interrogate if the awards are right or not, nor is it to figure out which award show has the best taste. I'm sure there will be games that you don't like that will be awarded, and games that you love that won't be mentioned. And that's okay. A trophy, or lack thereof, doesn't change your opinion. I've narrowed it down to 5 different award shows that have been going for at least 20 years. We'll be looking at the 2 decades encompassing 2004 through 2024, and I'll only be focusing on the grand Game of the Year prize in each of these ceremonies. Okay? Okay, here we go. The first award show we'll look at is the Game Awards. This is by far the most commercial of the bunch. It is simultaneously an awards ceremony reflecting on the past calendar year, and a showcase for new and upcoming titles. This quirk, looking back while looking forward, is unique to the Game Awards, and while it does draw attention away from the nominees and winners, it does get people to tune in. The show is spearheaded by one Jeff Keighley, who serves as the host, producer, and figurehead of the event. The Game Awards in its current form started in 2014, but before that, Keighley was the producer of the Spike Video Game Awards. These were kind of painful to get through, even back then, but you could still see the germ of what the Game Awards would become. I can see why he insists on hosting the event himself, if you catch my drift.
We teamed up with Rockstar Games to bring you something very cool. Grand Theft Auto, we just kind of talked about that. I don't know, I'll just keep reading.
I'm sorry, I kind of stole it.
Not at all. No, it's fine. You said it in Canadian, I'll say it in American. And Grand Theft Auto 5 won Soundtrack of the Year, and now the game's signature. Oh, we really just said this.
I know, I totally stole.
Not at all.
I'm sorry.
I think people are... Do you want to hear it again?
There is no official submission process that a publisher has to go through to get considered. The question of what qualifies is taken on a case-by-case basis. Expansions, DLCs, remakes, and remasters are all eligible. This is the only award ceremony that makes this distinction. Nominees are selected by a jury made up of game publications. Each outlet submits 5 choices for each category, ideally incorporating the opinions of their entire staff of journalists and critics. The publications included are from around the world, but are mostly made up of groups from the US and UK. The Game Awards receive over 100 ballots, and the games that appear the most will receive nominations. Winners are selected by that same jury. The jury's votes are combined with a public popular vote, though weighted heavily in favor of the jury, in order to determine the winner of each category. The DICE Awards take a different approach. The awards, which stand for Design, Innovate, Communicate, and Entertain, are a part of the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. The Academy was founded in 1996 as a nonprofit to recognize the interactive medium. It's kind of like the Motion Picture Academy or the Recording Academy in that way. Games are submitted to the Academy by their publishers. The publisher will submit for several craft categories, such as art, story, or sound, and one genre category. Each craft and genre category will have a peer panel made up of at least 22 industry professionals. These people will narrow down all the submissions to a much more manageable list. For the Game of the Year award, everyone who is a part of one of these panels will vote on what they believe should win. The top 5 results will become the finalists. After this, voting opens up to the rest of the Academy. The Academy is made up of over 30,000 members who are active professionals in the video game industry. To join the Academy, an individual will have to have either 2 credits on 2 shipped games, or have worked at an established developer or publisher for 2 years. The members will vote on their favorite finalist, and then the DICE Awards will crown their Game of the Year. The Game Developers' Choice Awards fills a similar role. This awards ceremony is held in conjunction with the Game Developers Conference, or GDC. This is an annual industry-focused event that features a bunch of panels, networking opportunities, lectures, and awards. The judging body for the Game Developers' Choice Awards is the International Choice Award Network, or ICANN. This is a group of developers from all across the industry, though this group is rather exclusive. You have to be invited to join. Each ICANN member nominates 3 titles per category, provided they do not vote on any game they have any personal involvement with. This will create a shortlist that a separate awards committee will pare down to a list of finalists. After this, ICANN and the awards committee will vote, which will give us our Game of the Year. The British Academy of Film and Television Arts, better known as BAFTA, has their own branch for interactive media. While they're probably best known for their annual film awards, they began recognizing games in 2004. Approximately 1,200 BAFTA members will play the games submitted and vote on their favorites. To become a voting member, a person will need at least 5 years of experience working in the games industry in a key creative or managerial role, and either work for a UK company or a BAFTA-nominated studio. These 1,200 people will vote, and then the top 10 games will be longlisted. After that, the same group will vote again and narrow it down to 6 finalists, followed by a final round of voting to decide on the Game of the Year. And finally, we have the Japan Game Awards. From what I can tell, this is the only video game award show sanctioned by a branch of government. It's supported by Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, and organized by the Computer Entertainment Suppliers Association. This means that the year in Game of the Year isn't the calendar year, but the Japanese fiscal year, which starts on April 1st, though it appears that starting in 2026, the eligibility period will begin on June 1st, which isn't the start of the fiscal year. Whatever. The games are selected by a committee, whose members will vote for the game they think is most deserving of honors. They will then meet together to select the ultimate winner, judging each title on its design, programming, graphics, sound, and scenario. They will also take into account the results of a public poll, and what's unique to these awards, a game's commercial performance will be taken into account as well. This is also the only award that routinely ties, but we'll get into all that in a little bit. Okay, that was a lot. There are obviously more award shows, but these 5 reflect the elusive institutional acceptance. I want to stay away from individual publications or critics naming their Game of the Year. And I also want to, for this exercise at least, stay away from awards based solely on public opinion. So while winning a Steam Award or a Golden Joystick would be fantastic, that's not really what we're after here. For now, we'll stick to these 5 awards: the Game Awards, the DICE Awards, the Game Developers' Choice Awards, the BAFTA Game Awards, and the Japan Game Awards. The BAFTAs are the youngest of the bunch, starting in 2004, so that's 21 years. You ready? Here we go. In 2004, Half-Life 2 walked away with 3 Game of the Year wins from DICE, GDCA, and the BAFTAs. The Game Awards, in their Spike era, gave it to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, while the Japan Awards recognized the first Monster Hunter. 2005 was a diverse year, with Resident Evil 4, God of War, Shadow of the Colossus, and Dragon Quest VIII taking home awards. The BAFTAs skipped this year for some reason. I'm not sure what that was about. 2006 saw Gears of War winning DICE and GDCA. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion won the Spike Awards, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter won the BAFTAs, and the Japan Game Awards tapped both Final Fantasy XII and Brain Age. In 2007, BioShock was a 2-time winner at the Game Awards and the BAFTAs, with Call of Duty 4, Portal, Wii Sports, and Monster Hunter Freedom 2 taking home awards as well. 2008 was all over the place, with awards going to Grand Theft Auto 4, Little Big Planet, Fallout 3, Super Mario Galaxy, Wii Fit, and Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. Even though some of these games came out in 2007, they were released after the cutoff date for those year's awards, which is why Mario Galaxy is here. And also, we're starting to see a bit of a trend in Japan. 2009 was the year Uncharted 2 won big and took home 3 trophies, while Batman Arkham Asylum, Mario Kart Wii, and Metal Gear Solid 4 took home awards as well. 2010 had 2 big winners. Red Dead Redemption won both the Game Awards and the GDCAs, while Mass Effect 2 won the DICE Awards and the BAFTAs. New Super Mario Bros. Wii took home the grand prize in Japan. 2011 was Skyrim's year, as it won 3 Game of the Year awards. Portal 2 won the BAFTA, and Monster Hunter Portable 3rd won the JGA. Journey took home 2 awards in 2012, DICE and GDCA. Other winners included The Walking Dead, Dishonored, and Gravity Rush. The Last of Us cleaned up the following year, winning 3 awards. This was the final year the Game Awards existed in their old TV-based format, and Grand Theft Auto V took home that prize. Animal Crossing New Leaf won the Japan Game Award that year. In 2014, Dragon Age Inquisition was the big winner. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, Destiny, Yokai Watch, and Monster Hunter 4 were also awarded. Okay, we've made it over halfway. Let's take a cat break. Alright, here we go. 2015 was another year with 2 big winners, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Fallout 4. The Japan Game Awards went with Yokai Watch Blasters. 2016 was Overwatch's year, as it won 3 top honors. Uncharted 4 won the BAFTA, and Splatoon won the Japan Game Awards. In 2017, we had the first sweep year, when a single game won 4 awards. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild won the Game Awards, the DICE Awards, the Game Developers' Choice Awards, and the Japan Game Awards. The BAFTAs were the odd ones out, instead opting to award What Remains of Edith Finch. As a side note, we'll see 3 more years where one game wins 4 awards. Can you guess what they are? Did you guess God of War in 2018? Because it's one of them. The Japan Game Awards were the odd ones out this time. And can you guess what game from 2018 they awarded? Of course, it was Monster Hunter World, obviously. 2019 was pretty diverse in terms of what games were awarded. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice won the Game Awards, Untitled Goose Game won the DICE Awards and the GDCAs, The Outer Wilds won the BAFTAs, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate won the Japan Awards. 2020 was the year of Hades, as it took home 3 awards. The Last of Us Part 2 won the Game Awards, and Animal Crossing New Horizons won the Japan Game Awards. This doesn't mean anything, but this is the second time both a Last of Us game and an Animal Crossing game have won in the same year. It probably means nothing. I hope. Alright, 2021. It Takes Two won 2, with Inscription, Returnal, Ghost of Tsushima, and Monster Hunter Rise also taking home awards. Okay, we have another one of those sweep years. Did you guess Elden Ring in 2022? Because you'd be right. The BAFTAs gave their top awards to Vampire Survivors that year. And in 2023, we have another sweep, with Baldur's Gate 3 taking home 4 awards. The Japan Game Awards instead went with Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Never change, guys. And finally, in 2024, we end with Astro Bot winning the Game Awards, the DICE Awards, and the BAFTAs, with Balatro winning the Game Developers' Choice Awards, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom winning the Japan Game Awards, qualifying for 2024 because of the cutoff period. If you must know, Metaphor ReFantazio won in 2025 due to that same cutoff. All right. That's a lot of information. Let's see if we can find any patterns. There have been 110 awards given to 74 individual games across 21 years. Of those 110 awards, 44 have been given to original titles, standalone games, or the first in their series. 24 have been given to sequels, the second or third games in their series. 38 have been given to games in existing franchises, series with 4 or more games. And 4 have been given to games with existing IPs, such as Batman or Lord of the Rings. A game's place within its own series doesn't seem to matter all that much. Well, what about the release date? Does the time of year a game comes out affect their chances? Well, I went through and found the release date for each of these 74 games and weighted them for how many awards they received. It turns out the average release date for a Game of the Year winner is May 27th, the 147th day of a non-leap year. Happy birthday to all my May 27thers out there. The best time to release your award-winning game would either be the spring or fall. Breaking it down month by month, we can see that March, April, May, September, October, and November are popular release windows. The summer and winter, not so much. July is the birth month of the least number of award-winning games. But what about the games themselves? Well, outside of Vampire Survivors, Brain Age, and I guess maybe Balatro, every other game is presented with 3D graphics. Even if it plays in 2D, like Little Big Planet or Hades, the character models will be in 3D. The camera perspective plays a rather large role as well. Of the 110 awards, 69 have been given to games with a third-person camera perspective. 24 are presented in first person. 15 are presented from a 2D perspective, and 2 are presented in kind of an abstract perspective, looking at you two again. Single-player games are far and away the most awarded, with only 9 awards across 6 games going to multiplayer-focused titles. Of all the other single-player games, the awards tend to prefer titles that have a definite ending, as opposed to a game where you just chase a high score or play forever. Actually, only the Japan Game Awards tend to award games without defined endings, with 2 Animal Crossings, Wii Sports, Wii Fit, and Brain Age taking home awards. The closest thing in any of the other shows is Balatro winning the Game Developer's Choice Award, but even then, it is possible to beat Balatro. While we're still talking about single-player games, award shows tend to favor ones with a more linear structure as opposed to an open one. 57 awards have been given to games that follow a linear story or take place in a defined sequence of levels. 41 have been given to non-linear games that give more player freedom and/or take place in open-world environments. Do the awards tend to favor games of a certain length? Well, of the 98 awards given to games with defined endings, so excluding these, the average campaign lasts 47 hours and 40 minutes, based on data reported to How Long to Beat. While some short games can take home a Game of the Year award, such as Journey, Untitled Goose Game, or Portal, big beefy RPGs like Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Ring, Skyrim, and the Monster Hunter games end up making that average runtime much longer. Really, runtime doesn't seem to be much of a factor. Genre boundaries can be a little subjective. Without getting too far in the weeds of what qualifies as what genre, a lot of these games can be classified as action-adventure games with role-playing elements. 46 of the awards went to games that focus on melee combat, as in the player character uses their fists, a sword, or some similar weapon to progress. 36 of the awards went to games in which the player character primarily uses a gun. 10 awards went to platformers, 9 awards went to puzzle games. Sports, racing, simulation, and story-focused games won awards with much less frequency. These genre and gameplay lines can get a little blurry, like you can have a shooter with a melee weapon. Let's just move on. Speaking of violence, does a game's content rating matter? Well, if you take the content ratings in 3 major regions, North America, Europe, and Japan, look at each game's rating, assign a recommended age to each rating, and average them all out, we'll find that the content in the average Game of the Year winner, according to the ratings boards, is appropriate for a 13.2-year-old in North America, a 13.8-year-old in Europe, and a 13.2-year-old in Japan. All that to say, the average content rating is a T for teen, a PEGI 12, or a Cero B. Just looking at the spread of these numbers, it might seem like North America tends to prefer M-rated games over other territories, but that's mainly due to the ESRB only having 4 main ratings categories as opposed to 5. The 18+ AO rating is reserved for special cases and is a lot less common than the Cero Z rating and the PEGI 18 rating. So the 17+ M for mature appears a lot more frequently. When it comes to player characters, award shows preferred if the character is authored, as in the character has some sort of predefined personality and is not designed by the player. 72 awards have gone to games with authored characters. 35 awards have gone to games in which the player can influence the way their character looks. Sometimes this is as simple as, do you want to play as the boy or the girl? Other times the player has complete freedom to make the character they want. 3 awards have gone to games where the player character is abstract in some way, like the player basically plays as themselves. You two again. So, okay, who are these authored characters then? 9 of these awards have gone to games that star something non-human, such as a robot, an animal, or a mascot. 8 awards have gone to games with large ensemble casts. Beyond that, all other games star a small number of humans. Breaking it down further, it's mostly dudes, like far and away. 44 awards have gone to games where the player only controls an authored male character, or a small group of male characters, like in Grand Theft Auto V. 6 awards have gone to games where the player primarily controls authored female characters, and 5 awards have gone to games that have a duo of male and female characters. So, yeah, the Player Character Club is mostly for boys. Read into that what you will. Alright, the average Game of the Year winner is a single-player action-adventure game presented in a third-person perspective that releases on May 27th. It will feature a human male protagonist that uses either melee weapons or a firearm. The content will be appropriate for players who are just over 13 years old, and those players will spend around 47 hours with it before calling it their Game of the Year. I feel like I just described literally every AAA video game ever. This can't be right. But that's just an average. How about we narrow things down a bit? Let's look at the games that swept their respective years. There are 11 games that won at least 3 Game of the Year awards: Half-Life 2, Uncharted 2, Skyrim, The Last of Us, Overwatch, Breath of the Wild, God of War, Hades, Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and Astro Bot. What do these 11 games have in common? Well, all these games are based on established genres. Take Half-Life 2. It's a first-person shooter through and through, but it injects a healthy dose of world building, story, and new mechanics to redefine what a first-person shooter is. When this game came out back in the day, there was nothing else like it. Uncharted 2 takes the formula established by its predecessor and delivers a grandiose collection of action set pieces. One could argue that it set the standard for linear action games. The Last of Us does a similar thing, pushing a stealth shooter formula in a more cinematic direction. Skyrim delivered on a vast open world that hadn't really been seen at that scale before. Overwatch took the multiplayer shooter and made it accessible and full of personality. Hades made the roguelike formula more user-friendly and filled its world with memorable characters. Astro Bot is a solid 3D platformer that feels both nostalgic and fresh. Take an existing formula, one that has a storied history and proven fundamentals, and then do something unique with it. Present these old ideas in a new way. And when in doubt, add character. Lots and lots of character. Okay, but what if I really want that goatee? What about the 4 big dogs? Well, it's kind of a similar thing, only instead of presenting an existing genre in a new way, present an existing franchise in a new way. Breath of the Wild was the first game to win 4 awards, and it's a clear example of what I'm talking about. The Legend of Zelda has been going since the mid-80s. It's one of Nintendo's great series, and it was based on a fairly strict formula from its 3rd game onward. Breath of the Wild broke that linear formula open, and allowed the player to roam at their leisure. It still feels like a Zelda game, though the pacing, progression, and the whole vibe of the experience is completely fresh. The same thing in a new way. God of War 2018 is a similar story. The original games based on Greek mythology were these brutal action games starring a guy who yells all the time and turns everything into a bloody pulp. This reboot is still a solid action game, though the camera perspective has shifted, the backdrop is now Norse mythology, and the main character has softened up quite a bit. There's a heavier emphasis on story this time around. While this can't be confused for the game that shares its title, it still shares a lot of the DNA of that old series. Elden Ring, while technically an original IP, feels like the culmination of everything From Software had been doing with its Souls series up until that point. The moment-to-moment gameplay is in line with what those unforgiving action RPGs had been doing for over a decade at that point. But, like with Breath of the Wild, it broke the formula wide open, turning it into an open-world odyssey. There's also a different flavor of world building this time around, with George R.R. Martin providing a lot of the story stuff. Elden Ring is the usual Souls formula, only presented in a brand new, exciting way. Baldur's Gate 3 is a legacy sequel to games made around the turn of the millennium. It uses the 2 decades of tech advancements to craft a role-playing adventure unlike anything really seen before. Beyond that, it takes Dungeons & Dragons, the great-grandfather of all RPGs, and presents it in a way that's accessible and easy to understand. It presents this legacy role-playing game and adds some slick visuals, some memorable characters, and loads of player freedom. It's familiar, yet brand new. Alright, there we have it. That is how you for sure will win Game of the Year. All you need is a legacy franchise to breathe new life into, and you're set. Well, I don't know, that feels sort of wrong. All these games are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but this list feels sort of limited. Like we're leaving a bunch of really amazing titles behind. We're faced with a realization that undercuts all of this. These awards can only do so much. Just as the awards like a certain flavor of game, there are several things that award shows unilaterally dislike. Games that fall into the simulation, strategy, racing, sports, fighting, or horror genres don't do particularly well. There are a few exceptions, but they are few and far between. Plenty of games in these genres receive universal acclaim, only to not be nominated for any Game of the Year award. Portable games only do well in Japan, and games made for phones, forget about it. The only mobile game nominated for any award was Monument Valley at the BAFTAs. Award shows also aren't really fans of sequels to previous Game of the Year winners. Of the top 11 most awarded games, 7 of them have had direct sequels released as of this writing. Tears of the Kingdom and The Last of Us Part 2 won 1 award apiece. God of War Ragnarok was nominated in all 5 ceremonies but walked away empty-handed. Half-Life Alyx was nominated twice but won nothing. Same thing with Uncharted 3. Shadow of the Erdtree was technically an expansion, so it wasn't eligible in several shows, even though it was basically a whole new game. Overwatch 2 had some issues, so not really surprised there, and I'm writing this before Hades 2 has had the chance to win anything. I guess we'll see. But that's not really all that surprising. Award shows like familiar things presented in new ways. Both Tears of the Kingdom and The Last of Us Part 2 do exactly that, so they come out on top. I'm not really sure what the deal with Half-Life Alyx is. Maybe there's a bias against VR games in there too. Actually, yeah, that's the only VR game that's a finalist, so add that to the list. There's also another underlying issue. These awards are popularity contests. Sort of. What I mean by that is a large portion of the voting body needs to be aware of a game in order for it to be considered. Smaller indie games have trouble breaking through. It's tough to get your game out there in the first place. It's especially tough to get your game to be reviewed and receive critical acclaim. But to get acknowledgement at an award show requires the game reaching a critical mass of popularity pretty much as soon as it comes out. A game like Undertale, for example, is a household name at this point. A game changer, undeniably influential, and it received no Game of the Year nominations from any award show. Same thing with Hollow Knight, one of the most awe-inspiring games of the 2010s that no award show took notice of. I mean, even something like Braid from back in the day didn't receive any nominations either. When this game came out, there was nothing like Braid, at least on that scale. These are games that, with hindsight, are wildly influential and important touchstones in the modern gaming canon. But when they came out, that influence wasn't apparent just yet. In fact, award shows aren't good indicators of what will be influential in years to come. Going into this, I was kind of under the impression that these shows had an obsession with From Software, but actually, no. Demon's Souls, the Dark Souls trilogy, and Bloodborne received nominations in their respective years, but never took home the ultimate award. Souls-like was already a genre by the time Sekiro and Elden Ring got their flowers. Also, what about something like Minecraft? Perhaps this doesn't qualify because the game itself changes so much, but, it's Minecraft. There's an entire generation of people that were raised on this game. It is wildly influential and endlessly popular, and the only nomination it received was for a console port from the Japan Game Awards. With the benefit of hindsight, it's amazing just how much Resident Evil 4 got right when it comes to over-the-shoulder camera perspective. This game is crazy influential and a key step in fully cracking the third dimension, but when it comes to awards, it only received a single one. But then again, I'm writing about Resident Evil 4 in 2025 and not 2005. I live in a world where a bunch of people have been enjoying and learning from and iterating upon Resident Evil 4 for 2 decades now. Award shows can tell us what the best thing is right now, but they have a hard time telling us what will ultimately stand the test of time. Before we wrap up, I have to address a serious question. What's the deal with Monster Hunter? Okay, of the 27 games that have won a Japan Game Award, 8 of them are Monster Hunter games, and it's why? Well, the simple answer is that Monster Hunter is huge in Japan. It's a popular series that has millions of fans. But it goes beyond that. In an article for Kotaku, writer Toshi Nakamura attempted to figure out why Monster Hunter is such a phenomenon in Japan, but not as much in other countries. Through his interviews, he found a common thread: togetherness. Monster Hunter is a game that thrives when people play with one another. When the series made the jump to the PSP, it skyrocketed in popularity, as people could now play with just about anyone, anywhere. Playing Monster Hunter with friends, family members, coworkers, it's a way for people to bond over a common goal, over a video game. The Monster Hunter series hit a level of ubiquity that was impossible to ignore. When a committee of officials appraised the games that were released in the previous fiscal year, taking popular opinion and sales figures into account, Monster Hunter keeps coming out on top. But then again, does that shut out other interesting games? What do these award shows actually want? It's easy to look at these award shows and think of them as unflinching monoliths. The Game Awards bestows upon you GOTY knighthood. But really, these awards are decided by a bunch of individuals. Sometimes it's only a few, sometimes it's several thousand. Sometimes it's people who make games, sometimes it's people who write about games, sometimes it's people who support the economy of games. But when it's all said and done, these awards are decided by people who have opinions about the best games of the past year. And when those voices get squashed together, when those individual voices become a crowd, those opinions can become kind of generic. The best game of the year will look like a T-rated action-adventure with RPG elements starring a guy with a weapon. I mean, I love a lot of games that fit into that category, don't you? But when I look back on some of my favorite games, a lot of them are weird. A lot of them don't really fit into neat boxes or are rough around the edges. And while I would wholeheartedly recommend them, I understand that they're not for everyone. Award shows are attempting to do the impossible. They're trying to aggregate a favorite. And while that's fun, it kind of misses the point of what makes games special. Playing a game is a personal experience. It is the medium that asks the most of its audience due to its reliance on interactivity. By taking control of a piece of software, you have become a participant in its world. And since games are so multifaceted, each user will focus on different things. Do you prefer fast-paced action or crunchy character progression? Or do you like admiring the art and music? Do you value a good story? If you enjoyed a game, does it really matter if it receives an award or not? Sure, it might be fun to celebrate or complain about, but it doesn't change the experience you had with a title. Awards are just honorifics. These trophies and plaques can't have emotional reactions. They can't predict what will be celebrated decades down the line. They can't be inspired to check out a new subgenre or design a game of their own. Award shows are a part of the conversation, but they're not the end of the conversation. But man, it sure would be fun to win one.